Hey, everybody. I'm Ryo Yamaguchi, the publicist at Copper Canyon Press, and you are tuning in to season 4 of our interview series, Line Break, which goes off the page and into the poems and minds of our beloved poets. We've had such fun over these seasons, hearing poems, talking about writing, books, and life. It's been one of the all-time favorite things we do at the press. So friends, for season 4, we have a format change. For this season, we are doing some close reads. Each episode will focus on either a single poem or a single topic, wandering away, returning, and wandering away again along all the little paths we simply can't resist. The episodes will probably be a little tighter, a little shorter, but we can't say for sure. Thanks for joining us. For this episode, my goodness, the extraordinary Patricia Spears Jones. She's the new state poet of that Empire State. She's a pillar in the Brooklyn poetry scene and someone who seems to be able to write in and out of every type of poem imaginable. What we want to talk about to you today is something a little hard to pin down: magic moments. Read through Patricia's new book, The Beloved Community, and you'll encounter countless numbers of them, those moments in our lives we all have at the deli or laundromat or walking down the sidewalk, when we pause, when the light is just right, when someone makes a peculiar gesture, or the memory of a loved one long gone springs to mind, and we feel all of the world behind it. Patricia, welcome. Thank you for being here.
I'm so glad to be here on this gloomy November day.
Yeah, it is. I know. Are you a winter soul, a fall person? Do you get into it, or are you? It sounded
Well,
like you weren't quite ready
I'm
for
a,
snow yet, but yeah.
I'm an Aquarius, so we're all winter born babies. So, winter is not, as long as you don't go out and run around in the snow like a crazy person, winter is okay.
Winter. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And also, I live, autumn in New York is really
Mm.
beautiful.
Hmm.
And this year it was unbelievably beautiful. So
Yeah.
I am very, yeah, it was just pretty amazing.
What do you think was it? Was it just the certain quality weather and stuff, or like?
It was just, I mean, there had been a lot of rain, and so the leaves, the tree, there's still slowly but surely the leaves are going. But the turn was really beautiful, and it's just, and the it has been warmish, but not too warm,
Yeah.
and just with a few exceptions, just glorious days to be walking around in New York City.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, mostly people are protesting in New York City, but that's
Yeah.
that's the world that we live in.
Yeah.
But it's been
Yeah.
kind of extraordinary.
Yeah. I'm so happy to hear it. I was I do love this kind of time of year and things. And well, you're kind of bringing up something I was a little bit of the theme of what we want to talk about today, and this magic moments idea. And I think maybe all of our conversation is just going to be getting at what we mean by that when we say that. But I kind of want to start and ask if you've had anything that you would call a magic moment, like in the last week or so, something like that. What's like a scene from New York or something that kind of stands out to you,
I don't know about a
if you have
magic
one?
moment, but it's been really, I mean, last night was my book signing at
Yeah.
the local bookstore called The Word is Change, and all kinds of nifty people showed up, and I did it with Nicole Callahan and Ricardo Maldonado.
Oh, awesome. Great.
And I had asked them to do this, over a year ago, actually, and because they both live in the neighborhood, and I mean, Bed-Stuy, or frankly, Central Brooklyn is a place of writers. I mean, there are lots and
Yeah.
lots of writers. I mean, Greg Parlow may well be somewhere in Dubai, but his house is on Quincy Street. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
all this kind of stuff. So it's been really interesting to kind of the have a sense of my being by living in this neighborhood and walking down the street and people are saying, well, where are you going? I'm saying, I'm going to my book signing. And they go like, oh, okay, I can't go, but I'll go get the book later. I mean, it's like that, it's like that kind of neighborhood. So I'm like, okay, this is where I live, and I have neighbors who are sophisticated enough to like go, oh yeah, she's a poet and she has something, blah blah blah. I'll go.
Yeah.
And so it and Also, I mean, one of my real actual neighbors came to the reading, and he said, I've been following you on Instagram, and I knew you were going to be doing this. And I'm like, oh, I actually have a follower, right? Like, uh, and
I bet you have more than one. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and so and he came in, and it was really interesting because the range of people, I mean, on this on just my little slice of Macon Street are so interesting. Um, not everybody stays here, but there are people on the street who are serious practitioners of Yoruba. And so every once in a
Yeah,
while, all of a sudden you'll see all these people in white going into one place. We're like, okay.
mhm,
And
yeah,
and every year the same beautiful roses, these incredible roses come back. And
yeah,
and down the street, I think, was one of those places where early hip hop videos were taped. So it's like a
yeah,
strange and amazing
yeah.
place. I lucked out when I moved.
No, it's incredible. And it's rare. I think it's important to remember that. I mean, that there is, I mean, there's no place like Bed-Stuy or Central Brooklyn as you're saying
Central
before this.
Brooklyn is
Yeah,
really special. I mean, I used to live in Prospect Heights, and which is on the other side of Crown Heights, and I mean, everything that's because it's the highest point in Brooklyn, from Prospect Lefferts Gardens on to here. We were like above, so when all the hurricane stuff happened, you know,
yeah,
it didn't bother, people were like, well, okay, but people, and she said they, not the same thing because they're
yeah,
right on the water. So yeah, but let me read like one poem that is very
yeah,
much
yeah.
a Bed-Stuy poem, because it's a funny poem, and it wound up as in Steve Cannon's uh, um, anthology, where he asked poets to work to do something and then collaborate with an artist. And so this poem, Morning Song, also is a little bit about the people who like literally pick up all the bottles on the street. Morning Song. You wake up to the phrase salt lick. You realize you know not one thing about salt licks. You know salt and lick, but together, how does the salt lick salt? You know you are moving to the land of word games, where musical instruments, unstrung, battered, too much play. Each day, the gleaners walk sidewalks in search of bottles. They separate already separated bags to find precious glass that is plastic. They hate the cans. They know the places where beer overwhelms soda, where huge milk cartons say children, many children, live here. They do not whistle when they work. They do not lick sweat off tired arms. They go about the business of poverty with grace and noise, early morning dragging the weight of others' waste.
That's wonderful. It's such a great poem, and I love it as a portrait of the community, of this beloved community,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
of a critical person in it, the Gleaners, and I think, I mean, at least I've spent a lot of time in New York, and I think of Gleaners as a crucial role, or as of a
mhm,
very ubiquitous kind of person there,
mhm,
It kind of brings to mind this question I have a little bit about, and I'll think of this um a bit like a craft question. Our intern Dia has helped a lot with these questions, and has a lot of kind of questions around craft. And one thing about it that I kind of was curious when I'm looking through these poems, because this is one snapshot, and I'm wondering like what you start with when you write a poem. Like, did you set down to like write a poem about Gleaners, or was it the Salt Lick thing that
No,
began
it was
it,
a
or like,
salt. It was literally the saltlet. It was
yeah,
literally the the idea when it is I mean, the line, you know, you're moving to the land of word games. That's what it was. It was
Yeah.
like, what? And then, but I know that I had looked, I had been rereading um, some history that was exploring Millet, is that how you say his name? You know, and the painting of the Gleaners. And then I realized I've been looking at these people for years. They're walking up and down the street. They're always bagging stuff that's been bagged. They undo all these things. I mean, it's like it's so, I mean, and I've been watching them, and I realized they're the Gleaners. They're the people who pick up after everybody's thrown their stuff out and found some way to make money from it, you know. And there's competition. This because this is New York, right? And there's a competition of, you know, who gets there first, blah blah blah, and all this, and it's but they're also incredibly poor. And um, so it's like really fascinating to see like the different kinds of people who make up any community and what they do and what they show, you know, that you know there are places where there's more beer than milk, where there's more, you know, glass than plastic. I mean, and those are some real things, and they really do hate cans. So, so it was. So that's so you know. But sometimes it's just about, you know, when you get into wordplay, and then you know, I had a conversation with one of my students the other day who had written a poem where she used a squall in her title, and she had and I was, you know, and I've been in a squall, so I was saying, you know, and she was trying to describe it, and I said, you know, what were you when were you she says, I was never in a squall. I really wanted to write this other poem, but this is what came up. And I said, well, maybe this is the poem that you're supposed to write. Sometimes you have to follow the poem tells you what it wants to be, you know.
Yeah, I love that, and I think you're echoing things that other guests we've had on the show have said about that, where it's, you know, the poem begins, and I don't know where it's going to go, you know.
Mm-hmm.
What I love often in this and in this book is that the result is something that I think is tries to make whole, you know, and I think recognizing the duress of folks like Gleaners and their poverty and where you get to this point in the poem that's a point of grace itself in the poem, and you talk about the grace of that poverty, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And in many ways, I feel that the poem is what takes us there. The poem is what unveils that truth, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know it at the start, you know. And I hear you saying you don't know. You don't sit down and know you're going
No.
to get to that line, you know. Like,
No, but I also know that, you know, behind all those things, behind the fact, I mean, I know what a gleaner is, you know, because I have read those art
you live with
histories.
it. Like,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
So there's this real sense of there's this kind of both this very there's a lot of intellectual work going on, but there's also this sort of uh you know, lived observations, the ways in which we see each other, hear each other. I mean, I like the idea of thinking about something dragging on the street, because that's something that's real. You hear it in the morning, sometimes. So it's you know, so that kind of sensibility shows up, and I think you know, poems come from a lot of different places. I mean, we were talking about ones I was going to read today, but then I'm obviously going to change my mind. So, one of these, one of the poems, which is a very strange poem, is called Poet, and I rarely write about I mean, I do write about poets, but um, many years ago, I was asked to do, I don't know quite what I was asked to do, but all of a sudden, oh, I was looking at translations because you know, I was the translation judge for Pan American Syndrome a few years ago. And I chose Maria Negroni's, the translation of Maria Negroni's book. I was so proud of myself, an actual living person as opposed to like, you know, all the dead poets that everybody was writing about. Anyway, I tend to do that. And so
That's
one of the
wonderful. Yeah.
books is by a Mongolian writer who lives in Taiwan. Her name is Sui Murin, and so she her whole book is all about, you know, the lover that got away. And she's still moaning over him, literally. And I read this just about the time that I broke up with my ex. And you know, and so but one of the things about it that I like is that although a lot of the poems in this book are about my local New York based community, this one has some of that, but it takes a while to get there. So it's called Poet. There's a epigraph from her book, her poem, An Artiste. And it's please do not believe my beauty, do not trust my love. The poet is Mongol. A translator follows her heart, once broken, and yet she sings in a way that makes her broken heart my broken heart. She is in exile. The mountains are now ruled by China, and her culture is assaulted daily. Buildings blasted, children made to learn Mandarin. This is all too familiar. The ways of empire, very old ones, very new ones. But these are poems of love and poems of loss. The lover's inconstancy is all too familiar. Her laments are tender, then angry. There are many storms in her poems. They rise from the mountains, from the sea, from the rivers inside her veins. They rise up. In oceans far from her, a woman reads her words and quickly says, Sister, I have been there. His hands holding mine, gone. His lips no longer touch mine. And yet, the yellow roses, the birthday kisses, our shared embrace of deep down Chicago blues, those conversations knee deep in a dream of dark loving, tremble my heart. And so you stand in the shadows at a train station, looking for the moment your love steps off his train. He is not alone, and you will not be happy. The storms throb the streets of Taipei and scatter rose petals across the sidewalks and streets of Brooklyn.
I'm so happy that you chose to read that poem just now, because this poem really sticks with me a lot, and I think it's because of this dramatic thing that happens at the end and how rapidly we're transported from Taipei to Brooklyn,
Mm-hmm,
and it's such a testament to the transportive power of literature, really, you know, of reading the book of
mm-hmm,
her words. And I love that say where you know, you embody the reader of her words in this poem, and you
mm-hmm.
know, in this communion of her strife, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's really beautiful. And in those, and again, and it's kind of centered around this kind of moment. I mean, there's, you know, that the moment where she's waiting at the train station, and the moment, well, as you were beautifully describing earlier, of kind of the rain sort of taking apart the autumn leaves of New York and how beautiful it
Mm-hmm.
is.
Yeah.
And I love all of it kind of gelled in the crystal of that, if I'm kind of
Yeah.
mixing metaphors there. But this kind of brings to mind another question, that also Dia kind of had, that sort of helped me with, which is who do you write for? Maybe I'll just ask you that straight up.
I guess I probably write for myself.
Yeah,
I
perfect. Yeah,
think
yeah.
you know, people ask about audience, and I literally, I mean, I think when I was younger, I probably thought I was writing for all the other, you know, baby poets as we were running around trying to impress each other with our work. And now I just think I write for whoever is willing to read poetry, um, and who um, and who cares about language and is who wants to explore the the values and generosity that poets, including me, I hope, provide in language, because so much of the language that we listen to or hear or read is so dismissive, disrespectful, horrifying, dehumanizing. We can go on. And there's such deep, I mean, we're in a deep moral crisis. And so one of the things that I hope that I and other poets do is just remind people that language is not always about corruption and and arrogance and horror, that it also is about um, interrogating our existence in a way that says, can we not look towards justice? Can we not look towards mercy? Can we not look towards the divine? Can we not look towards love?
Yeah,
Or
beautiful.
as in the sense of everything from the sense of Eros to what is the one that's supposed to be beyond Eros? I always forget the Greek
I can't
word.
remember. Yeah,
Yeah, but the one that's supposed to be like for everybody.
yeah,
I mean, and so and that's hard. It is extremely hard to talk about these things in a world that is so cynical and
yeah.
so I mean, and I have plenty of sarcasm in my poem, and I have plenty of, I mean, I last night when I was at the bookstore, I read the Look Back in Hatred poem, which
Yeah.
basically is about looking back in hatred.
And
So
that's all right. I mean, that's
which,
it's
and that's perfectly
yeah,
fine. There are some people and things that need to be hated. I
yeah,
have no problems with that. But there's also, you know, we we want uh we want to, to live as well as possible. We want to give a sense of that. And we also want to sort of I mean, I grew up in the South, and I grew up in the last days of legalized segregation.
hmm,
I always say that because people think, "Oh my God, it doesn't." It was legal, people.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so there were actual laws on the books and stuff. And so
The
I'm
same.
very
Yeah,
mindful of how the state controls our lives
yeah,
and what is needed to resist that kind of control. I mean, and so to the extent that I am a beneficiary of the civil rights movement, I certainly am. Uh, do I think that there are many things about this nation and the world that need radical and change, like yesterday? Of course I do.
yeah, yeah,
Do I think that's going to happen? No,
yeah,
because on as much as I am a poet, and in some ways that means I'm also kind of a dreamer. I'm also very much a realist,
yeah,
and I know how much pain and suffering um, there is, but I also know that there's always been pain and suffering, and we need to just kind of work towards, if not healing, then at least understanding that we need to come together as community in different kinds of ways to alleviate pain and suffering,
yeah.
to bring about justice, um, to make sure that there's not another generation of gleaners.
Hmm, yeah. Yeah, really beautiful, Patricia. And I feel all this. And I feel this in the poems, and there's so many works in here that have, if even not even official dedications, the titles are to
Mm,
artists, singer.
mm,
There's so much music in these poems. Folks who've left the world. They've passed away. And so I was asking myself if these were elegies or obituaries or memorials, and I couldn't really quite find the right sense of how this
Some of
kind.
them are some of
Yeah.
them are elegies, but I guess when I think of elegies, I think of elegies in the Frank O'Hara sense of elegies, because
Yeah.
my
Could you
favorite
explain that a little? Like, yeah, yeah.
like because like when when he's like walking down the street and all of a sudden he remembers all of his friends who
Mm,
have died, right? I mean,
yeah.
it's not like I'm writing a poem about so and so. It's not like Alfred
Yeah.
Lord Tennyson going on for like 50 pages about his best bud,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is and it's an amazing
It's his
poem,
own thing. Yeah. Yeah.
but but don't we, you walking down the street and all of a sudden you remember, someone who was very dear who's no longer with you. That in the same way that, you hear a song and you remember your first boyfriend or girlfriend. So it is,
Yeah.
and so like Hannah's cigar box and the Lee
Yeah.
Brewer poem and the Walking Avenue. All of those are sort of about East Village people like Steve Cannon, Hannah Weiner, Lee Brewer, who were very important in my life as a young person trying to figure out how to be a poet and how to be a person in the world. I mean, I came to New York just about a year after I graduated from college, and so so in some ways they're not only sort of elegies for those specific people or kind of ways tributes for them, but they are also a way of talking about a world that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, that particular
Right.
East Village world has been long gone.
Well, and I'll say I think what I'm hearing you describe here too is kind of a kind of ultimate beauty about what these kinds of memorials or remembrances and in the poems can do.
Mhm.
That it can keep alive not only these folks who've passed, but also that time of the world, that time of the East Village.
Yeah,
And that the poems can keep alive in memory and in the language of the work.
yeah.
Um, these places, and and part of that also is is the kind of contradictory nature, and there was something I was kind of thinking about earlier when you were saying too, where it's like something that's both a memorial and a celebration, a lamentation
Mhm.
and a celebration, a call for justice, and also a recognition of power that we do have, and
Mhm.
that both of those modalities can work at the same time
Mhm.
when you're in the space of art,
Yeah. Well, it's also too that, I also think of myself as always being in conversation um, with a variety, I mean, other human beings, obviously other poets and writers and stuff, but also just the way in which um, our lives are lived. I mean, when I wrote Green Ribbons today, I just can't read because it's too long, but
yeah.
uh, uh, it took me it took me a while because I lived in Atlanta briefly after I graduated from college and I hated Atlanta. I
Yeah,
mean, I'm
yeah,
sorry
sure,
for all
yeah.
the people who love Atlanta. I'm sorry, people. I'm
Of course.
sorry, but I really don't like Atlanta. Although there's some wonderful things about it, but the I mean, when started to hear about all those children being killed, Black children being killed,
Mm,
and I just remembered the topography, the landscape. I thought, oh, this is the world's easiest place to have serial killer. I mean, it
mm,
really is. And that the target were these young Black children, and then there's all this consternation. I mean, it was just fan, and then they realized that, Tony K. Bambara, who lived in Atlanta until several years until she left there and went to Philadelphia, um, wrote her last book was about that. And I think I am convinced to this day that writing that book helped to exacerbate her illness,
mm.
and she had cancer. And I just I just there's things you have, there's more than one consciousness in the world. I mean,
Mm.
there's things that beyond us or around us, or and and poets and musicians and visual art, we all tap into that. You don't have to have any additional uh, uh, materials in your body to do this. You don't have to
Yeah.
imbibe anything or whatever. It's just there.
Yeah.
You hear voices, you see things, they're there, and you can bring them out and deal with them, or you can suppress them.
Yeah.
And depending on your own capacity to remain centered, this will be okay. But sometimes it throws you off.
Yeah.
And I think there are some things that are very scary in this world. And one of the things that I realized when I read through all of the poems for this book, and this is like a smaller, I mean, the original manuscript was like about 20 pages longer,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it got wheedled down. And thank you, Peter Cudino, who was my
Yes.
reader he read my
Wonderful.
book
Yeah.
read my manuscript about 3 times. Um, One of the things I realized was that I was really um, there's a lot of violence in these poems.
Sure. Yeah.
So, there are these, moments of a great joy and all kinds of stuff. There's a lot of violence.
Yeah.
And because this is a violent world,
Yeah.
and I don't focus on it in the way that I think a lot of poets do. I mean, I don't particularly kind of, train myself to look at trauma, all that kind of stuff. It just makes me kind of
Yeah.
crazy. But
Sure. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
other people can do that. I can't. But I can tap into what that means to the culture,
Yeah.
and especially and also in terms of history. I mean, I was thinking about, I mean, people are protesting today, and you asked me to read Adornment, so I'm going to read that
Yeah.
because, this was written, gosh, what, 10 years ago, maybe?
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, because I think it was after the Michael Brown's the murder of him.
Yeah.
Certainly was not a police action; it was a police murder.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Adornment: red cap, red scarf, red balloon, a phalanx of protesters, a quarrel, a militia, off camera, geared up, prepared to muster the musk of daily incivility. A roar of past coincidences, blood smell, men's bodies. The red cap of their hearts salutes on October day. Plush beauty, can you smell the apples? This fact of harvest? On the round globe, claiming our heart's desire to live more than 18 years, or whatever year it was the bullets took. St. Louis, Hong Kong, Mexico City, wherever the young demand their future, a boy stands wearing a red cap in the rain, in the heat, observing the phalanxes coming down from the high rises, up from the basements, out of the dormitories, into the streets.
So terrific. I'm so glad you did read that poem. I
I
don't know.
know you wanted me to read it. I said, okay, I would.
Yeah, I want to hear it. Well, I think, and I think, and I'll say, I think that's, well, it's a good place to, I think, to bring us to a rest here for this conversation. And one that I'd like to be in, because it leaves us at a point of a power, of taking power, of speaking truth, of not, and I think it fits also in sort of the theme that we've touched on today of this idea of magic moments. And this is something that I was really pulling in. This is, I felt there in the streets with these folks in the protests there because of the way that you've written this, and that is a magic moment, that quiet before the protest begins, and that's so well captured here. And I think it's just an important, it's just an important thing to carry with us, that the poem delivers, and I'm grateful for that. Yeah.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Well, so good. Well, I do wish, I mean, there's so much more we could talk about, of course, but I think this is a good place to bring it to a close.
Okay.
Yeah, this has been really great, Patricia. I'm so happy to have this conversation with you and to talk about these poems and to talk about your community, and how much this work lives among all the other artists and in Bed-Stuy and in Brooklyn and oh, well, I'm jealous. I think that you
Oh,
get to have all
well,
that. Yeah.
well, because of Copper Canyon, it lives in the whole world.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
yeah.
We'll be citizens of that world. And so will these poems. Well, thank you. Thanks again so much, Patricia, for being here.
Okay. I'm glad I got to do this. Thank you.
It was really fun. And thanks to all you out there watching and listening. This has been just a really wonderful opportunity to have these conversations with our beautiful poets. I don't need to tell you, go out, get the book, read the poems, and have them in your lives. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.